Hello, my name is Kristen Bolden, and I'd like to welcome you to The Other Side of History. Now, in this talk, we're going to do part 2 of the deliverance stories from the Nonconformist ministers in Scotland. Now, John Craig was an associate of John Knox and a known name in the Scottish Reformation. He had been converted in a Dominican convent in France after getting hold of one of John Calvin's books. He became an enemy to the country and was seized as a heretic and carried to Rome. There he was condemned to be burnt. But on the evening before the day of execution, the then reigning pontiff died. According to the custom, the doors of the prison were thrown open. All others were released, but heretics, after being permitted to go outside the walls, were taken back to their cells. That night, however, a tumult was excited, and John Craig and his companions escaped. They had entered a small inn at some distance from Rome when they were overtaken by a party of soldiers sent to apprehend them. On entering the house, the captain looked John steadfastly in the face and asked him if he remembered having once relieved a poor wounded soldier in the neighborhood of Bologna. Now, John had forgotten it. "But," said the captain, "I am the man. I shall repay your kindness. You are at liberty. Your companions I must take away with me, but for your sake I shall treat them with all possible lenity." End of quote. Now the captain gave John all of the money that he had on him and helped him escape. The money soon was gone, but God had not forgotten him. While John was lying at the side of a wood, full of gloomy apprehensions, a dog came running up to him with a purse in his teeth. Suspecting some evil, he attempted to drive the animal away, but in vain. Taking the purse, John found in it a sum of money, which he carried with him to Vienna. Now, George Wishart was a scholar of Cambridge and a true and earnest believer in the Reformed movement. He had come from his native Scotland and had begun to preach. Multitudes thronged to hear his preaching. It was said that the congregations were so large that a church was not large enough to contain them. George would preach in the streets, at market crosses, and in the fields. In the end, the papal ecclesiastics brought him to a martyr's stake, and that was in 1546. John Knox was then just a youth, and he had been George's companion and pupil. In his history of the Reformation in Scotland, Knox tells how again and again his friend George had been delivered from his foes. On one occasion, George was preaching, and the cardinal had laid a plan to lure him to his death. Knox said that the cardinal had given to George a letter, as though it had been from his most familiar friend, the Laird of Kinnear, desiring him with all possible diligence to come unto him, for he was stricken with a sudden illness. In the meantime, the cardinal, he provided 60 men with jacks and spears to lie in wait within 1.5 miles of the town for his murder. Receiving the letter, George made haste at first, riding with some honest men from the town. But suddenly George stopped and turned around. The men that he was riding with asked why he was turning back. He said, I will not go. I am forbidden of God. I am assured there is treason. Let some of you go to yonder place and tell me what you find." End quote. So his request was fulfilled, and the treason, it was exposed. George commented, "I know that I shall end my life in that bloodthirsty man's hands, but it will not be on this manner." End quote. And God, he did preserve George Wishart's life from his enemies until his work was done. Knox said that George was illuminated with the spirit of prophecy, and he saw things pertaining not only to himself. There were things that he said in the audience of many that was afterward felt by some towns and even the whole realm itself. George Wishart knew that he was to give up his life for the stake. God had delivered him again and again, but George believed that the Spirit had convicted him of the certainty of a martyr's death. When George was led to the stake, he comforted his friends with these words, "God shall send you comfort after me. This realm shall be illuminated with the light of Christ's gospel as clearly as ever any realm since the days of the apostles. The house of God shall be built in it." End quote. The leading human agent in the Reformation in Scotland was John Knox, the youthful companion of George Wishart. Soon after George Wishart's death, the French Catholic forces were invited to Scotland, and Knox and many associates were taken prisoners and made to serve as slaves, pulling at the oars in the French galleys. A deliverance seemed impossible, and Knox was nearly dead with the hardships of a cruel life. He was more frail than the others who succumbed. However, he felt a definite conviction from God that there was a work for him to do in Scotland. In his history, he tells of conversations with an associate in the galleys. There was a man by the name of James Balfour, who was in the galley with Knox and friendly with him. James would often come to Knox and ask his view on things. He asked if he thought that they would ever be delivered. Knox said, from the day that they entered into the galleys, he believed that God would deliver them from their bondage. Knox believed that even being extremely sick, that he would not depart this life until his tongue would glorify God's holy name in Scotland. John Knox said this to his friend James Balfour many years before he finally was able to set foot in Scotland to preach. John Knox was accustomed to sit at the head of the table in his own house, with his back to the window. Yet on a certain night he had such an impression that he should neither sit in his own chair nor allow any other person to sit in it. He sat on another chair with his back to the table. That very night a bullet was shot in at the window, purposely to kill him. The bullet grazed the chair in which he always sat, and it lighted on the candlestick and made a hole in the foot of it. But Knox, he was left untouched. John Knox did not have always the winning manner of George Wishart, but his rough and ready, iron-souled devotion to the cause of reform was used of God in breaking down the stronghold of intolerance in Scotland. To finish this history on the Scottish Nonconformists, I would like to give one last deliverance story of a Scotsman who was the chaplain to King Henry VIII of England's fourth wife, and her name was Anne of Cleves. She was the queen who was queen for only 6 months. Now, Anne of Cleves was a Protestant. In the appendix to his Book of Martyrs, John Foxe, he tells us that he was loath to insert anything in this book which may seem incredible or strange, end of quote. Yet he felt constrained to report the following story of deliverance. It was told by the escaped man himself to a minister that was well known to John Foxe. Now, this is the account. There was one Laremouth, otherwise called Williamson, chaplain to the Lady Anne of Cleve, a Scotsman to whom, being in prison in Queen Mary's days, it was said as he thought, thus sounding in his ears, "Arise and go thy ways," end of quote. Now, whereunto when he gave no great heed at the first, the second time it was said to him again in the same words. Upon this he fell to his prayers. It was said the third time likewise to him, "Arise and go thy ways." End of quote. So, which was about half an hour after. So, he arising upon the same, immediately a piece of the prison wall it fell down, and as the officers came in at the outward gate of the castle or prison, he, leaping over the ditch, escaped. And in meeting a certain beggar, he exchanged his coat with him, and coming to the seashore, where he found a vessel ready to go over, he was taken in and escaped the search, which was straitly laid for him in all the country over. And that's a quote from the Foxe's Book of Martyrs. Throughout the scriptures, we catch frequent glimpses of angels, tireless in their ministry for God to man. At times, angels have appeared in a visible form that can be seen to the natural eye. Other times, they've been seen in a vision or a dream. Angels can come in the guise of men. This is why the apostle says that men entertaining strangers have entertained angels unawares. We have a powerful God, and although many of the men and women who angels have ministered to have already passed away, these ministering spirits are alive. They speak to us the way that we should go. The question is, are we so close to God that we know His voice and are willing to listen to it when He speaks to us? God wants to be able to step in and to save us from peril, just as He has His followers from the past. The history of these amazing miracle stories is given to us by William A. Spicer, who lived from 1865 to 1952. Now, William Spicer went as a missionary to England in 1887, and later in 1892, he became the Foreign Mission Secretary for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. As part of his work for the next 30 years, until 1922, he traveled all over the world, encouraging and helping foreign missionaries. During his visits, he would ask if the missionaries and their workers knew of incidences in which God had especially protected his earthly children. William Spicer's book, it is titled The Hand That Intervenes, and it is full of examples of God's intervention in the affairs of men down throughout the ages. I hope that you have enjoyed these beautiful miracle stories and they have been an encouragement to you. I want to thank each one of you for listening, and I'm wishing you God's blessings.